My name is Clara, and for most of my life, I've thought of myself as a river stone, smooth on the surface, shaped by the constant, tumbling pressure of the water around me, but solid and unchanging at my core. My daughter, Lily, is the sunlight that dances on that river, the reason for its sparkle. At 8 years old, she possesses a fierce, joyful light that I have always felt was my sacred duty to protect. Her father, a man more like a passing cloud than a fixture in our sky, drifted out of our lives when she was just a toddler, leaving the two of us to carve our own path in the quiet, tree-lined town of Havenwood. We live in a small cottage with a crooked porch and a garden full of unruly lavender, a little world we've built just for us. It's a peaceful existence, a stark contrast to the family I was born into. They live on the other side of town in a sprawling new build that always felt more like a showroom than a home. My mother, Eleanor, is the matriarch, a woman who commands attention with the gravitational pull of a small planet, everything and everyone forced into her orbit. My older sister, Sophie, is her cherished satellite, married to a successful estate lawyer, with a pristine home and a daughter, Chloe, who is held up as the paragon of childhood perfection. My father, Richard, is a quiet man who long ago learned that his role was to absorb my mother's moods and maintain the fragile illusion of peace. I, the younger daughter who chose to be a primary school teacher and live in a rented cottage, have always been the anomaly, the source of what my mother calls unnecessary complication. Our family dynamic was a river I had learned to navigate, mostly by staying close to the shore, out of the main current. But a river can flood, and on a blustery afternoon in early autumn, the banks broke and my entire world was washed away. I was grading spelling tests in my empty classroom, the scent of chalk dust and rain-soaked leaves hanging in the air, when my phone vibrated with a frantic energy. It was the school principal. Her voice was thin and stretched, a thread about to snap. There had been an accident. A delivery truck, a blind corner, the school bus carrying Lily home. The words blurred into a cacophony of horror, airlifted, trauma center, severe injuries. The drive to Havenwood General is a memory I don't truly possess. It exists only as a series of disjointed images, the frantic blur of passing trees, the white-knuckled grip on my steering wheel, the ragged sound of my own breathing. I found myself in the sterile, hushed waiting room of the intensive care unit, a place where time slows to a thick, agonizing crawl. It was there that a kind-faced surgeon with tired eyes, Dr. Benning, found me. Lily had sustained a severe traumatic brain injury, internal bleeding, and several fractures. She was in a medically induced coma, her small body fighting a battle I couldn't help her with. He used words like critical and uncertain, words that landed like stones in the pit of my stomach. The next 24 hours were a waking nightmare. They finally let me see her, a tiny figure lost in a sea of white sheets and tangled wires. The rhythmic beep and whoosh of the machines were the only sounds in the room, a terrible mechanical heartbeat that had replaced the sound of her laughter. She was on life support. My vibrant, sunlit Lily was eclipsed, and the doctors could not promise me she would ever return. That first night, I called my mother, my voice a broken whisper. "Mom," I choked out, "I need you." "Lily, she might not make it." A heavy sigh came through the phone, a sound I knew as well as my own name. It was the sound of my pain being an inconvenience. "Oh, Clara, you do have a flair for the dramatic. Children are tough." She'll bounce back. "I can't just drop everything and come running every time you have a crisis." Her words were a slap, but I was too numb with grief to fully register the sting. I thought it was just her way, her inability to cope with anything messy or real. I didn't know it was just the first tremor before the earthquake. I spent the next few days in a fog, living in the uncomfortable armchair beside Lily's bed. My colleagues from school, a true family of the heart, brought me thermoses of soup and clean clothes. They sat with me in silence, offering the profound comfort of shared presence. I read The Secret Garden aloud to Lily, my voice wavering as I described the robin and the hidden door, praying my words could find her in the darkness and lead her back. The doctors remained guarded. There were small signs of progress, but the road ahead was a vast, terrifying unknown. It was on the fourth day, a gray and drizzly Friday, that the texts began. I was holding Lily's small, still hand, tracing the lines on her palm when my phone buzzed on the bedside table. It was from my mother. "Eleanor, Clara, don't forget you're on dessert duty for Chloe's school fundraiser tomorrow. She wants those lemon tarts from the downtown bakery." I stared at the screen, the words swimming before my eyes. A school fundraiser. Lemon tarts. It felt like a message from a different universe, a place where children's lives weren't hanging by a thread. My fingers felt clumsy and slow as I typed my reply. "Me, I can't. I'm at the hospital with Lily. She's on life support." The response was almost instantaneous, a digital viper strike. "Eleanor, you always have to make everything about you. It's one fundraiser, Clara. A little drama doesn't excuse you from your family responsibilities." My breath caught in my chest. Selfish drama. The phrase echoed in the silent, beeping room. A wave of nausea washed over me. Then a second message, this time from my sister. "Sophie, Mom told me you're bailing on the fundraiser." "Seriously, Clara? Stop being so dramatic. Kids get bumps and bruises all the time. Chloe has been practicing her song for weeks. You're going to disappoint her because you need to be the center of attention." I felt the blood drain from my face. These were not the words of concerned family members. This was something else, something cold and monstrous. My hands trembled as I tried to make them understand, to bridge the impossible chasm that had opened between our realities. "Me, she has a brain injury, Sophie. She might die. How can you call this drama?" Then, a final text from my father. "Richard, your niece's happiness is important. You've always been jealous of Sophie's stable life. Stop using your daughter's situation to get sympathy and disrupt the family." I froze. My own father, accusing me of using my child's potential death as a tool for attention. The river stone core of me, the part one thought was solid and unbreakable, cracked. Tears I didn't know I had left began to stream down my face, silent and hot. I was staring at the phone, at the evidence of their chilling cruelty, when Dr. Benning stepped quietly into the room. He saw my face, and his professional demeanor softened. "Clara," he said gently, his voice a low bomb. "Are you all right? I have something we need to discuss." My heart seized. "Lily? Is it Lily?" "No, Lily is stable," he reassured me quickly. This is about a phone call the hospital received this morning." He hesitated, his gaze full of a discomfort that was clearly not medical. "Your mother, Eleanor, called our patient advocacy office. She identified herself as Lily's grandmother and began asking some unusual questions." I held my breath. She wanted to know about Lily's long-term prognosis, specifically in a financial sense, he continued, choosing his words with care. She asked about the costs of protracted care, and she inquired about Lily's inheritance. She wanted to know if you had a life insurance policy on Lily and who the beneficiary would be in the event that she didn't survive. The air in the room became thin, unbreathable. The beeping of the machines seemed to grow louder, a frantic, mocking pulse. "What?" I whispered. Dr. Benning's expression was pained. "It gets worse, Clara." She told the social worker she was worried about the financial and emotional burden on you. She asked about hospital protocols for brain death, how long a patient is typically kept on life support, and what the process was for a family to make difficult decisions. "Clara, I have to ask you this, and I am so sorry, but did you, at any point, discuss withdrawing care for Lily with your mother?" "No." The word tore from my throat, raw and ragged. "Never. I would never give up on her. She's my baby." He nodded, his eyes full of sympathy. "I knew it. I've seen you here every single day, holding her hand, reading to her. Your devotion is palpable. But I had to ask." "Your mother was very insistent." She seemed to believe that this was a practical, necessary conversation to be having. The pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to solve began to click into place. My mother's obsession with financial stability, her resentment of my unsettled life, her view of Lily not as her granddaughter, but as my burden. I remembered mentioning years ago, after I'd started my teaching job, that the school district offered a small life insurance policy for dependents. It had seemed like a responsible thing to do. I never imagined it could become a motive. Dr. Benning, I said, my voice eerily calm. What else did she ask? He looked at the chart in his hands, avoiding my eyes. She asked if there were any financial stipends for organ donation. I thought I was going to be sick. My mother, my own mother, had called the hospital where my daughter was fighting for her life and had essentially inquired about the cash value of her corpse. The crack in my soul widened into a chasm, and in that empty space, something new and hard began to form. Not revenge, not yet. It was something colder and clearer, the instinct for survival. I picked up my phone and screenshotted every single text message. I opened a new note on my phone and documented my conversation with Dr. Benning, dating and timing it precisely. From that moment on, I became a meticulous archivist of my own heartbreak. The next morning, Sophie called. Clara, about those tarts. Sophie, I cut in, my voice devoid of any warmth. I need to tell you what Mom did. She called the hospital yesterday. Oh, good, she said, relief in her tone. She was probably just checking in. See? She does care. She asked about ending Lily's life support, Sophie. She asked about my life insurance policy. A long, crackling silence filled the line. That's absurd, Sophie finally stammered. Mom wouldn't do that. I have the head of the pediatric ICU who can confirm it for you, if you'd like. Another pause, longer this time. Well, she said, her voice shifting into a defensive posture, you have to admit, the long-term costs would be astronomical. Mom is she's a pragmatist. A pragmatist? I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. She's discussing the financial benefits of my daughter's death. You're twisting things again, Clara. You're always so emotional. She's just thinking about what's best for the entire family's financial health. She's always been the responsible one. I hung up the phone. The call had confirmed it. They weren't just ignorant. They were complicit. The next week was a blur of small miracles and continued cruelty. Lily began to respond to stimuli. She squeezed my hand. Her brain activity showed signs of improvement. And through it all, the messages from my family continued, a steady drip of poison. Sophie sent me a Venmo request for $28.50 for the lemon tarts she'd had to buy. My mother texted to ask if I could watch Chloe next weekend because she and Dad had a golf tournament. Not one of them asked, "How is Lily?" Their disregard was so profound, so complete, it began to feel surreal. It was as if they lived in a world where my reality, my pain, simply did not exist. Then came the call that changed the trajectory of everything. It was from Mrs. Gable, a woman who had been my own mother's best friend before a falling out years ago that I never fully understood. She was a pillar of the Havenwood community, sharp, kind, and deeply respected. Clara, dear, she said, her voice warm with a concern that felt like a lifeline. I just ran into your mother at the post office. She told me about Lily's little accident. She said you were overwhelmed and had asked for privacy, that you didn't want any visitors or phone calls. My blood ran cold. Mrs. Gable, that's not true. I never said that. I've been so alone. There was a moment of silence on her end. Clara, she said, her tone shifting, becoming serious. Tell me exactly what is going on. And so I did. I told her everything. The texts. The phone calls, the horrifying inquiry at the hospital. I cried for the first time in days, a torrent of grief and rage and disbelief. Mrs. Gable listened without interruption. When I was finished, she said two things that I will never forget. First, I believe you. And second, this is not the first time Eleanor has behaved this way. She went on to tell me the story of the falling out I'd never understood. When her own husband, Mr. Gable, had been dying of cancer years ago, Eleanor had been a frequent visitor. But her concern, Mrs. Gable now realized, had been less about her friend's grief and more about their finances. Eleanor had repeatedly brought up the cost of his care, the value of their home, and had even suggested to Mrs. Gable that sometimes letting go is the most practical form of love. The friendship had ended when Eleanor had advised her to sell some of her husband's beloved collection of antique maps before he'd even passed, to get ahead of the expenses. "I thought she was just clumsy with grief, Clara," Mrs. Gable said, her voice heavy with regret. "But now I see it's a pattern. She doesn't see a tragedy, she sees a balance sheet. And she has been actively isolating you from your support system." Mrs. Gable arrived at the hospital an hour later with a brisket, a stack of magazines, and the righteous fury of a guardian angel. She took one look at Lily, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh, you brave little thing," she whispered, stroking Lily's hair. "You just focus on getting better. We'll handle the dragons." And handle them, she did. Mrs. Gable was on the board of Havenwood General. She was the president of the local historical society. She played bridge with the wife of the senior partner at my brother-in-law's firm. She didn't spread gossip. She simply began to tell the truth, quietly and factually, to people who asked. When someone mentioned seeing Eleanor looking upset, Mrs. Gable would say, with a sad shake of her head, "It's a difficult time. Eleanor is very concerned about the financial implications of her granddaughter's care." She even called the hospital to inquire about it. The seeds were planted. All I had to do was focus on Lily. 3 weeks after the accident, on a sun-drenched morning that felt like a promise, Lily opened her eyes. She didn't know where she was or what had happened, but she knew me. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice a tiny, fragile thing. "I'm here, sweetheart," I sobbed, kissing her forehead. "I'm right here." Her recovery was slow and arduous, a journey of 1,000 tiny steps. Physical therapy, speech therapy, relearning the simple things we all take for granted. Through it all, I kept my family at a distance. They learned of her progress through the grapevine, from whispers in the community that were now turning against them. The first major consequence landed on Sophie's manicured lawn. Her husband, Mark, was up for a major promotion at his firm. But after a golf game with Mrs. Gable's son, where the story of his mother-in-law's hospital call was delicately recounted, the partners began to have doubts. A man whose family demonstrated such a shocking lack of compassion in a crisis was perhaps not the man they wanted representing their firm's values. Mark's promotion was indefinitely postponed. Next was my mother. The pastor of her church, a kind man whose wife was a nurse on the pediatric floor, paid her a visit. He gently suggested that, given the stress her family was under, it might be best if she stepped down from her role as head of the church charity committee. My mother, for whom public image was everything, was mortified. My father's construction business, which relied heavily on local contracts and a reputation for integrity, began to dry up. People in a small town talk. A man who would call his granddaughter's fight for life attention-seeking was not the man you trusted to build your family's home. They tried to break through the wall of silence I had built. Sophie showed up at the hospital, demanding to see Lily. I met her in the hallway. "This has gone on long enough, Clara," she hissed. "You're tearing this family apart over a misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding, Sophie," I said, my voice as calm and steady as a frozen river. "You sent me a bill for cupcakes. Mom tried to find out if she could profit from Lily's death. Dad accused me of faking my grief. These are not misunderstandings. These are choices. And they have consequences. You are not welcome here." She stared at me, her face a mask of indignation. "You'll regret this," she snarled. "You'll come crawling back when you need us." No, I said, and for the first time, I knew it was the absolute truth. I won't. 6 months after the accident, Lily was home. Our little cottage was filled once again with her light, a little softer now, a little more precious. Her recovery was considered miraculous. We had a new family, a patchwork quilt of love and support. Mrs. Gable, my friends from school, the other families from the bus accident who understood our journey in a way no one else could. The news from my old family came in sporadic, sad bursts. Mark had filed for divorce from Sophie, citing her appalling lack of character in the court documents, which became public record. My parents, facing financial ruin from my father's collapsed business, were forced to sell their sprawling house. They moved into a small, anonymous apartment complex on the edge of town. Their social standing, the thing my mother had valued above all else, had evaporated. One afternoon, I received a single text from Eleanor. "Eleanor, I hear Lily is doing well. I miss my granddaughter. I think we should talk." I looked at the message for a long time. I thought of the river stone, worn smooth by pressure. But I wasn't a stone anymore. I was the river itself. I had learned to change my own course, to flow around the obstacles that sought to damage me. I had learned to protect the precious, sunlit life I carried with me. I deleted the message. I did not reply. A year after the accident, I was in our garden, helping Lily plant new lavender bushes. Her movements were still a little stiff, but she was strong and happy. She looked up at me, her face smudged with dirt, and said, "Mom, our garden is the prettiest." "Yes, it is, sweetheart," I said, my heart swelling with a love so fierce it felt like it could power the sun. I had come to understand that my family's actions were not a reflection of my worth, but of their own emptiness. Their cruelty was not my drama to carry. My revenge was not a fiery, destructive act. It was the quiet, steady, and joyful act of living well. It was in every laugh that bubbled up from Lily's chest, every goodnight kiss, every moment of peace in our sun-drenched little cottage. Sometimes, a family is not the one you were born into, but the one you build. It's the people who show up in the storm, who hold the lantern, who remind you that even after the cruelest winter, spring will always, eventually, come. Lily and I had found our spring. And we were planting a garden, a testament to our own resilience, a place where only love could grow.